Hello everybody and welcome to yet another anime review here today. We got something really fun today, fellas. So, let's jump straight into it. After a really good poll that I posted on YouTube, we got, 14 votes? 14 was when I looked at it. 15 was the total count by the time I deleted the poll. And you guys, not significantly, it was neck and neck with Yamada at level 999. But ultimately, Recovery of an MMO Junkie did win out. And thank God it did, because this was amazing, okay? So, let me do a little brief rundown in case you're not used to my reviews. Normally, I take forever, I ramble about a lot of stuff, I talk about characters, but I do not talk about the plots of these shows, because these reviews are not supposed to be a replacement for the shows, it's simply me giving my thoughts, and me telling you what I think about it, right? So, like, if you were to watch the review, you would get a good semblance of, should I watch this? Is it a good idea? Should I save my time? Or, you know, how good is it if I do watch it? Is it going to be, like, something I watch and it's mediocre, or what? Okay, and in this case, I've got to say, this was an amazing watch, fellas. So, we're not going to run through the plot or anything, but I'm going to give some of my thoughts of the show in general. So, this is Recovery of an MMO Junkie. So basically, a brief rundown just so you get an idea in case you're unaware. Basically, this entire show and this entire anime is about Morioka, who is a 30-year-old, they call it a NEET, which, by the way, I only learned what this word was because of this show. Apparently, it's an acronym that stands for not in employment, education, or training. So that's why they call it a NEET. Once again, I didn't know that, nobody I know knew that, so thought that was a cool thing I learned from this show, so, you know, maybe you'll learn something, I don't know, watching an anime every once in a while. Anyways, essentially, Moriko is, well, she's a little down in the dumps. I'm not sure if calling her depressed is the best descriptor. I mean, I would say so, but, like, I don't know. She doesn't exercise a lot of the qualities that you usually attribute to being depressed. She's more of not really very active, and also very self-deprecating. So that's why I would consider her depressed. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of things, you have Yuto Sakurai, who's, I wouldn't say he's successful necessarily, but he's got a good job. He's 2 years younger. He's 28 years old, and there's one thing that these two have in common. They both play this game called Fruits de Mer, which is an MMORPG. They're also both completely addicted to it. Now, there are some things to talk about with this show in terms of what it's really about. So, because of the way that the show's events occur, most specifically, the way that the manga goes, and the way that it was canceled early on, it means that this story was probably going to be very different from the one that we got, okay? And so, essentially, I'm not sure how much the author for the original manga was really expecting to write for this and willing to make for this, but they ended up getting sick, or at least that's from what I looked up. They ended up getting sick and they couldn't continue the manga. And so they did end up continuing a little bit of it after the anime. So the manga was written before the anime. They made the anime the full, entirety of season 1. Then they ended up making an OVA episode 11, quote unquote, following the manga's cancellation, because the manga was canceled, and so that means, no season 2. And so, anyways, they hit the kill button on that, and they had to come up with sort of a conclusion. Now, I think that this show has a satisfying conclusion, so, once again, I didn't get hit with a To Love Ru ending, where I was, like, banging my fist against the wall, or, losing my marbles, making a 52 or 51 minute rant video about it, right? Nothing like that. This did end in a satisfying way, although there is a lot that they didn't explore. So, like, for example, I think it's episode 2 or episode 3, Moriko bumps into Sakurai for the first time, and he, like, elbows her in the face, and she collapses on the ground, and she has, like, this, not vision, but kind of this nightmare scenario in her head, where she's surrounded by, like, this massive army of shadow figures, kind of, which is pretty much, I mean, it's a delve into her psyche, and they're also doing something that I can't really describe on YouTube without having to put a warning up. And so they were doing that sort of thing. There's obviously something you could go into with that. However, they never end up exploring it because obviously they don't have, first of all, the runtime, and second of all, they don't have a manga to follow it up, so there's no season 2 or anything. So there are some things that are kind of incomplete. Like Moriko, she doesn't have a job or any sort of like success by the end of the show, or what is considered success. And so you're kind of just left to think about like, well, she's gonna run out of money here soon, but oh well, you know. And so it's not really a big deal. It's not something you have to dwell on. But it is interesting to note how the show concludes. Now, obviously, you would know that there's spoilers involved in this, so yeah. By the end of the show, her and Sakurai, they're not together necessarily, but they're basically together, right? Now, I'm not sure, they didn't really specify in the OVA whether this was the case or not. I think they don't, but her and Sakurai are kind of like that. You know, I'm also not sure if, like, how big of a time skip there was. Maybe it was, like, a day after, you know, the previous episode. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Because there was a, for episode 10, next on thing that popped up at the end of the episode for episode 11. So it was supposed to be a continuation. It wasn't like they just shoehorned episode 11 in. It was kind of weird how it worked. But anyways, I would say this show at least leaves, like, a hopeful ending. Not hopeful in the sense that it's like the world is burning and maybe there's a chance at rebuilding society. Not that kind of hopeful. More of like, you know, these two are 99% definitely going to get together, okay? And everything's going to be cool and groovy. So that's pretty much it. As for the MMO world, it's pretty flat how everything works generally, right? So like Himeralda, Kanbei, Lilac, all of them, they're kind of just there. You know, they add to the story, they provide, like, advice, and they add a fun element to the anime, although they're not the most important characters in the grand scheme of things. Now, Kanbei's a little bit more important, because he's played by the guy that works at the gas station, or the convenience store, Fujimoto, and so Moriko actually interacts with him throughout her, you know, daily life. Or at least, you know, like every other day or so. They say she's in there a lot, so I presume it's every day. Anyways, that's pretty much all there is to say about the actual plot rundown of the show. So now let's get into a little bit of the details. So for starters, the opening of this show is absolutely fantastic. Okay, it's probably top 3 best anime openings that I've seen, in my opinion, right? So that's aside from Kaguya-sama Love is War's openings, and that's aside from To Love Ru Season 1's opening. Oh, and Tonakawa Over the Moon for You. So I guess this would be number 4. If I had to rank each of the openings, then this would be a number 4 spot. Easily an S tier, though. If I had to make a tier list on it again, like I did last time, I would definitely put it in the S tier, or whatever the equivalent of S tier is. As for the actual, like, content of the show, this show is pretty funny. It's a romance comedy, obviously. The romance is fantastic. Okay, now it's not the best I've ever seen. You know, it's not the most perfect paradigm of what it should look like. Okay, that would probably go like Tonakawa Over the Moon for You in that case. However, this show, I mean, it does everything right. I don't have any gripes or any criticisms with anything that this show goes through. Now, this show is pretty short, which is why there isn't a ton to talk about necessarily, and there's also not a lot of action in the show. So once again, there's not exactly a lot to go through. In the meantime, you have some serious players in this show. I'd call this kind of anime an A-list anime, which is what it sounds like. Every single person that's voicing a character in this show is somebody you're gonna recognize from another anime. You see, some of these shows, you get like random people and maybe 1 or 2 cameos that you recognize. Okay, so like, for example, To Love Ru, you have Brittany, like, Kowalski. I think that's how you say her name. And she voices Mikan. Keep in mind, this is always going to be the English dub, because I only watch it in dubbed. I'm sorry if I'm a traitor, that's just how it works. I did watch the OVA, which is entirely in Japanese, though, so I had to watch subbed for that. But that's kind of because I was forced to. Anyways, To Love Ru, you got one person that's like an A-list anime voice actor, right? Or actress, in this case. And then you get, like, some cameos here and there, you know. Actually, that's a lie. Alexis Tipton voices Lala, so I guess there's a couple in there. However, this show, literally everybody is an A-lister. I don't know if they classify these people as A-list actors or voice actors in this case, but I certainly do, because they're in absolutely everything. So, Aaron Dismuke was the most obvious. That man's voice, I instantly recognized it. He's been in so many shows. It's unbelievable. I've heard him, I think, at least in 3 different shows. I actually saw 2 shows in a row where he was a main voice actor. So obviously, the most notable one he's in is Kaguya-sama Love is War. Then you've got, Terry Doty? Is that how you say her name? She voices Moriko. She voiced Charlotte in Tonikawa Over the Moon for You, which is my favorite character in that series. Then, what else? You had Jesse James Gorell voiced Sakurai, I think most of the time, if not all the time. And so, he's obviously got some stuff. I think he was, he might have voiced Futaro in Quintessential Quintuplets. And then you've got Natalie Hoover, who voiced Lily. Actually, I'm mixing up Lily's voice actress and Moriko's voice actress. I don't remember who Terry Doty voiced that I recognize, but I do know Natalie Hoover is the one that voiced Charlotte in Tonikawa. I'm sorry, that was my bad on that. And then what else? You got Ian Sinclair, who voices Toywai, which he's easily the best character. That guy, Ian Sinclair, that man, he's on a different level. He's on a different world. I don't even know how to describe the man and his abilities. He's so goofy in everything he's in, and it's great to watch. He's most notably, once again, he was in Kaguya-sama Love is War. He was the narrator for the English dub, which the narrator in the English dub made it so much better. It wasn't even a competition between that and Japanese. So, yeah, he's great. He's a great voice actor. Anyways, that's going through some of the details there. Other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. The show goes well. The ending is great. You got a, happy ending, so nothing super depressing. I actually expected this show to have depressing qualities to it. However, I was not disappointed with the result. Because, it's funny. The names that sound sad are the names of something that's going to be joyful and fun. And then the names that sound like it's going to be peaceful and happy, like My Teen Romantic Comedy, ends up being the most depressing thing you've ever watched. And so I guess I just have to avoid the things that sound happy and go for the things that sound depressing. It's kind of like leaning into a punch instead of leaning away from it, I guess, is kind of what it's like. Anyways, that's pretty much all I've got for this. I would give this show an easy 10 out of 10. And you might be asking why I gave this a 10 out of 10 and not something like Your Lie in April. And, well, this comes down to a few things. Most notably, the most notable quality is I always rank things in their own category. And so I rank things based off how well they succeed in what they're trying to do. So, for example, Ore Monogatari, I think that show is basically a 10 out of 10. I'm not sure what I rated it in the video. It was like a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I rated it that way not because it's better than something like Kaguya-sama or Quintessential Quintuplets. It succeeds in what it's trying to succeed in, and it does what it's supposed to do. And this show does that exact thing. This show is not meant to be a long, dragged-out story with problems and, all this drama that appears. Okay, it's supposed to be a very simple story. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be funny. And it's supposed to be something with a good flavor of romance in it that's nice and steady. Okay, so it's not too quick and it's not too slow. And that's what it's supposed to be. And its focus never deviates. And so that's why I think this is a 10 out of 10. Besides, the humor is pretty good in this show. Okay, I laughed a good number of times, and I thought that there weren't really any jokes that I thought were embarrassing to hear. Even in some of the better anime that I've watched, there are some jokes where you're kind of just like awkwardly blinking at the screen. This show didn't have any of that. All the jokes, I would say, landed, or they were kind of just there, and you didn't really acknowledge them all that much. So, yeah, that's really all I've got to say. Overall, 10 out of 10. Would I recommend this? Absolutely. I would recommend watching this. And besides, this isn't a show that you've got to dedicate a whole lot of time to. I finished this show in 3 days. And that was with the whole, like, stream termination and delays and things like that. So, yeah, this one's pretty simple. It's only 11 episodes, and the 11 episodes is counting the one OVA. So there are 10 main episodes. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say. If you guys enjoyed and you want to see another anime review, I'm going to be doing My Dress Up Darling next, which is obviously a much, much more popular show and one that I'm going to have to put a decent amount of time into. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a fantastic day and a fantastic life. Goodbye, everyone.